morning, everyone. Today is November 9th, and this is a meeting of the State Street Subcommittee. Ms. Perea, could you please do a roll call?
Certainly. Chair Harmon.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon.
Here.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Thank you. We're all here. We'll start moving through preliminary matters on our agenda. That begins with announcements. If my colleagues have any announcements they would like to make, or if any of the staff members who are assisting us today have anything that they would like to share, now would be the time.
Good morning, Madam Chair, and hello, subcommittee members. Jason Harris, Economic Development Manager, City of Santa Barbara. As you can see on the screen, I just have two items would like to update the subcommittee on. As you all may recall from our previous meeting, the Downtown Santa Barbara organization was planning, and so I have the flyer up. They held their inaugural State Street Promenade Market last Thursday, November 5th. The second one is coming up this Thursday, the 12th, running through December 17th. On the 900 and the 1000 block, and I think it was a great environment, very festive. Saw some council members out and a number of the members of the public. So it's a great experience and just a great way to support our downtown retailers and these artisans. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see these two items. These are screenshots of our State Street Subcommittee webpage, and just reiterating, continuing to add and refine the information available from the public comment review and council review and comments. So we have the description of the prior subcommittee name now added, and then likewise we have the recordings all in one location to view the past meeting recordings. As always, these are also being shown live on City TV concurrently. So just wanted to give those updates. That's all I have. Thank you. Great.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. And I think now we can move through agenda review. Mr. Harris, I believe that's probably also you. Thank you.
Certainly, and just this kind of sets the order of the meeting agendas this morning. We have an update on the future of State Street visioning process. This is principally a walkthrough to the survey, draft public survey, resident survey that's out. So I'll be walking the subcommittee through that. And then we have an update at the AIA State Street charrette. So we have some members of the American Institutes of Architects Santa Barbara chapter that will be presenting. I have about 17 slides they've submitted for the subcommittee's review. And then we'll adjourn. We'll obviously have public comment on all of these items. And the next order of business is approval of minutes. And then we have general public comment items not on the agenda today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. Moving to approval of minutes from the October 26th meeting. If my colleagues have any comments, or I'll entertain a motion related to those minutes. Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciated the improved detail of the minutes. That was very helpful, and I'd like to move to approve them.
I agree very much with those comments. Thank you. Thanks for the added detail. I will second those. Councilmember Gutierrez, if you wouldn't mind coming on, we can all in favor. Please vote aye.
Aye.
Yes. Aye. Thank you. Those are approved. And now we will move on to general public comment. This is an opportunity for folks who are participating in today's meeting to make a comment on an item that's not agendized for discussion today. So if you have something that you would like to communicate with us about that is not on the agenda, please do so now. You can raise your hand in the app and Ms. Perea will be able to get us started. Ms. Perea, is there any general public comment today?
Yes, we have one person, that's Stephanie Armstrong. Stephanie, go ahead and you're free to speak. You'll need to unmute yourself, Stephanie. There you go.
Good morning, members of the council and our State Street Subcommittee. I'm Stephanie Armstrong, the Chief Marketing Officer for the Santa Barbara South Coast Chamber of Commerce. On behalf of our chamber, our 1,100 members, including our Hospitality Committee, I'd like to extend our appreciation for the process with which you are approaching the immediate needs for improvements to the State Street promenade, as well as the long-term planning. I'd also like to make sure we encourage that you continue to implement strategies that allow for the utmost flexibility for businesses to meet the criteria that you set as you continue to make modifications to the promenade. As you are aware, business is still deeply impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and it is important that we do not cause additional hardships, even unintentional, to businesses being able to operate. As we move into winter, we are already experiencing inclement weather shifts, and this will dramatically impact business operations, especially those predominantly relying on outdoor seating. We know the city is focused on addressing the issues of cleanliness and the transient population as well. The presence of the transients continues to affect our businesses, and we continue to see mentions of issues in local restaurant reviews and in feedback from visitors. We know this issue is complex, but we are eager to help support the city with this issue in any way we can. We at the Chamber are here as a resource for the city and continue to issue support as we address the long-term vision for State Street. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Armstrong. Ms. Perea, did anyone else raise their hands?
Yes,
For their hand?
Chair
Okay.
Harmon, we have Anthony Grumbine who'd like to speak as well. Anthony, feel free to go ahead and speak. It looks like you're going to, you're on phone, so there you go.
All right, thank you. Sorry, this is, I probably will have some things to add, and I just didn't know in terms of process how I should participate, but I was asked to be on here from council, so I'm jumping on. And so anyways, I just wanted to say hi, and then as the items come up, I'll throw 2 cents in or however it should be done, but yeah, however it works. So I'm glad to be a part of it, and I'll try to give some perspective especially from the HLC side of things as to potential good ways of steering things. So,
Great.
all right.
Thank you,
Good
Mr.
to see
Grumbine.
you all.
We're very happy to have you and happy to have your perspective as part of this conversation. Ms. Perea, anyone else?
Yes, we just had another hand raised. That's Barry Remis. He would like to speak. Barry, you may go ahead and unmute yourself.
Good morning, committee members. I just wanted to pop on to share that I had the pleasure of spending about an hour and a half on an e-bike ride, test driving one of our B-Cycle cycles with a marketing representative from B-Cycle. We did this on Friday afternoon. We toured we left from their secret hideaway location on Coda Street, where they're feverishly working on preparing the bikes and the docking stations. Took a ride around the beachway to the bird refuge and back. And I just wanted to let you know that this was my first time on an e-bike. So I was excited to do that. And also wanted to report back that my experience was that I didn't find the e-bike experience, at least not with these pedal assist B-Cycle bikes, to be in any way kind of unsafe from a standpoint of there was no element of the bike getting away from me. And just echoing the point about that these are pedal assist bikes, you really need to put a lot of effort into pedaling in order for that bike to produce any speed, really, especially when it comes to taking off. So I just wanted to share that with you to kind of give us an element of comfort. Obviously, we know that these bikes are going to be used not only by hopefully locals, but also visitors to Santa Barbara as well. And I know there was some concern expressed about the safety element of the e-bikes being on State Street along the promenade. And following my test ride, I can really say that it looks like to me that I don't think that those safety concerns will come to bear. It just really seems like they've done a lot with these e-bikes to make sure that they're safe. The brakes work very well, and it just doesn't seem to me like we might encounter much of that kind of a concern. So just want to share that with you. We're excited to be able to see the rollout begin as it becomes part of what they're working on. So thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Remis. Ms. Perea, I'll ask one final time, are there any further speakers for general public comment this morning?
No, Madam Chair, there are no more hands raised.
Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who is making public comment. Mr. Harris, now let's please move to the first item on our agenda, the update on the State Street visioning process. Thank you.
Good morning. So we have, as I referenced earlier, this update. We have 2 slides that I'll walk the subcommittee through to provide subcommittee and community members updates on the effort, but then we'll really transition and go through the survey questions that I have embedded into the PowerPoint today. So as we've referenced, we spent Mr. Dayton, Transportation Parking Manager, myself, have almost completed the outreach to commission committees and stakeholders. We have, I think, 2 groups left out of the approximate 20 that we met with mostly through October. As I referenced earlier, when we were about halfway through that effort, themes are clearly emerging, and so we'll start organizing that information. We'll be looking for the public survey to be reviewed and finalized and ultimately issued, and then gathering that information. We do have a dedicated email address for the public to communicate with staff and submits statements of interest. The agenda as well has my information listed. And with that, we really can transition into the presentation of the survey questions. I'm going to drop myself off screen to provide opportunity for the subcommittee members, and really the discretion here. There's a series of questions. I'll just look at my notes here. We have 9 questions in total, and then there's a series of demographic questions. And then we have 2 surveys. This is the one broad survey that would be available electronically. We'll print it in Spanish, and we'll have hard copies, and I'll speak to those latter points in the presentation of kind of the survey outreach effort. And then we have a slightly shorter version that would be available on the Apple iPad for ambassadors to do the intercept surveys on State Street. So with that, we could all read through, but also just for those that may have visual challenges, I'll also read what's on the screen. So this is kind of the statement of the survey to inform those respondents, kind of the context. So your Future of State Street survey, your opinion is important. The Santa Barbara city leaders are in the process of planning the future of State Street to shape how the area serves the community, especially the blocks between Gutierrez and Sola Streets. Please help by answering the following questions. Thank you. Question 1A, here's a list of some actions that people have suggested for improving State Street. Which one do you feel is most important today? And those series of 5 responses, A is improving the economic health of retail stores and restaurants. B, addressing the needs and issues of those experiencing homelessness. C, adjusting infrastructure such as sidewalks, landscaping, and lighting to enhance the streetscape. D, holding more cultural arts events, activities, and F, no answer. I'll pause here. Again, I have a series of slides for each of these questions to walk through. And I'll ask Madam Chair, subcommittee members, if they would like to comment on these individually, or if you'd like to walk through the survey in totality and then go back and discuss before I proceed. I won't make any assumptions there.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. I think it would probably be best to open an opportunity by question so that we don't miss anything. Mayor Pro Tem Snedden, do you have thoughts?
I do. I have just on, are we going to have public comment on these items before we discuss, or is this just for questions, or can we make a comment on this at this time? I'm not sure how you want to.
So I would like us to try to generally contain more toward questions, but certainly comments will come up, but I do want to make sure we have public comment before we make sort of any overarching comments. But I think it makes sense question by question. If you have specific feedback, please feel free. I want to make sure we get it all out there and not miss anything.
Thank you. And I guess I can say my statement and then save for discussion. But on these questions, on this one, I would like to see a question about environment or sustainability or something along those lines. And I guess in general too, and we can save this for discussion, but I feel very boxed in by the multiple choices and then no answer. I would like, or we can discuss, I don't know, I'm sure it's a lot more work, but an open-ended F, or other, what are your ideas? I just know from giving multiple choice tests versus open-ended answers, what comes back in a short answer, open-ended, can be wildly creative and something we hadn't thought of or didn't even know. So I'm not, I guess I'll say that for all of them, that the no answer option could maybe be other, with an opening for, people who have ideas, and I'd like to include them. Yeah.
Thanks,
I
Mayor.
believe that can be done just in looking at some of the advanced questions coming forward in response, Madam Chair, Mayor Pro Tem. There are some other questions that do have other and then have fill in that blank, as it were. So I think we can replace F with that type of response. So I will take that comment forward and then keep going.
Councilmember Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only thing I would recommend is possibly on C where it says adjusting infrastructure such as sidewalks, landscapes, and so forth. I think there's a potential of possibly redirecting 2 streets, maybe including that in there, just so that people don't feel like they're getting blindsided when it does come up.
Like traffic
Great.
flow.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Gutierrez, that's a great suggestion of broadening because as we have been discussing the possibility of evaluating the one-way street condition is part of that. So that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you.
And other than that, I would maybe recommend somehow addressing bicycling, but I feel like that might fall under C anyway. So those would just be my 2 suggestions.
Thank you, Councilmember. Why don't we continue going through the questions, and we will continue to take an opportunity to ask questions about the questions or give feedback as we move through them, but I think it's important that we go through this survey. Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Certainly. So question 1B, and this is kind of following thereof. So question 1B, and of the same list of actions that people have suggested for improving State Street, and we have a little bit of format there issue, which do you feel is the second most important today? So again, I would take those commentary made in the prior slide and incorporate into this one as well. So this was just, as you can see, kind of a ranking. So we asked for the most important, now we're asking for the second most important. So I'll just take the feedback offered on Q1A slide and incorporate here on Q1B.
Thank you. Please continue.
Yes. Question 2, which audience do you believe city leaders should consider most when planning the future of State Street? Visitors from out of the area, future downtown residents, all local residents, people residing in the city of Santa Barbara and surrounding communities, and downtown merchants, business owners. E, all audience should be considered equally, and F, no answer.
Any questions or comments from my colleagues on that? Hearing none, please continue. Oh, excuse me, sorry. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Just the same comment that other would be, I guess, advisable on all of these. And I suppose I have a question about the purpose of asking for what's the most important. I would think we would need to balance all of these, and I guess it's just a question of the in building this survey, what we're thinking about asking for the most. I think it, here as a resident, I don't really want to put any of these as the most important. They're all really important, and how do they support each other would be, I guess, more what I would be concerned about. So just, I guess, a question about what purpose it serves for you, the surveyors, to know what the most is.
Yes, no, that's Madam Chair, Mayor Pro Tem. This was, this one question, we had a bit of debate, within the kind of marketing survey world. There are times where they look to define kind of the market audience as a possibility. And so there was a little bit of that back and forth, just as you're describing of, well, no, we treat everyone in general government service equally, right? And residents, and in the context of kind of infrastructure, marketplace planning perspective, if there was a sense of perspective that we were trying to gauge of who would be the heaviest users of this area, and just as we would be defining the space, that was kind of, I think, the context of where the market surveyor was coming from. And Mr. Dayton might have additional comment.
Well, Madam Chair and committee members, I think it's really important as you review this survey is that you keep in mind what the goal of the survey is. So the goal of the survey is to be a compendium or a supplement to all the boards and commissions that we're asking vision questions of. And then we're proposing to bring back some building blocks in simple terms, hopefully for you, that will help you craft a vision that you would recommend to council, a vision for State Street. So when you ask specifically to that end, as you ask that question, I think that answer E gets to what you're talking about. People can say, you know what, everybody's important and everybody should be, all views should be considered equally. But then, you know, some people may, what we've heard on the, and actually why it's there, why answer B is there. What we've heard from your boards and commissions is this new thought, and it's actually been a really new thought for me to consider is Santa Barbara's usually say design for locals and the tourists will come. It's a very common thing that has been said, and that's what I expected to hear, and many people did say that. But the other thing that they have started to say, and this drum has beat it probably the loudest, is that that there's a future community of downtown residents that we should be considered of. So we added that to the list to see if we could tease that out to the general public.
Again, I suppose my question is then to put it in the context of most is, you know, then is the most important the future downtown residents? I mean, we want to create that and have that be all of these happening. And then I guess for the all audiences being considered equally, the phrasing of that, they all support each other. So the question of how does this one help and support the other as a community? So again, it's, I guess it's the point of a survey, but it does, again, feel a little bit boxed into me to choose the most, the best. And they all seem like we need to integrate for the best possible outcome for each of those. I guess that's my comment or question.
I think I understand, Mayor Pro Tem, the discomfort. And it is important to understand who we're designing for and who to lean into. But it could come back that unlike your boards and commissions that people think everyone equally. That's a possibility.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. Councilmember Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I had the same concern that Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon did. And I just feel that it also kind of puts an added pressure on us to abide by what the survey might have highlighted, in the sense of, like, depending on who's answering the questions, they might favor one group over the other. And if we go against that, then that could be something that might rub the general public the wrong way. So yeah, I just find the question problematic to begin with. That's about it.
Thank you, Councilmember Gutierrez. Any further comments? Okay, well, given that we're discussing this, I guess I'll just throw in my 2 cents so that I don't miss the moment. I really understand the discomfort that my colleagues are expressing related to this question. Surveys are blunt instruments, I think, and that's part of the challenge. So I would encourage us to keep that in mind. I think this would be a really interesting data point for us to have, if only to understand the framework that the other questions were answered in. So what I do like about this question is it allows us to see, okay, if questions 1A and 1B came out in this way, it's related to this sort of deeper purpose that folks are feeling. Without this, I wonder if maybe those questions are going to be a bit out to sea and contextless. is maybe my worry. So that's how I see this as an effort to try to give us context to the other questions that are being asked. But I certainly agree that it may be a blunt instrument. And I'm wondering if my colleagues might feel a little bit more comfortable with this question, as Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon suggested, if we really make sure that we give an opportunity to answer more imaginatively, not just no answer, but a box where you can put in your own vision. I don't know if my colleagues want to.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I realize we're not really fully discussing here without public comment yet, but maybe we can consider as we go through these ranked choice that all of these are important, and then which is the most, which is the least, and that might be a really useful data point in terms of how to prioritize.
I love that idea. Can Mr. Harris speak to whether that's feasible? I think that would be ideal for all of these questions. Jane.
Okay, well, we're waiting for Mr. Harris to come on, but I'll just say the other thing to keep in mind is we asked a professional to do this survey, and they can rank them, absolutely. That is a much more difficult task for the mind to comprehend, and which is why the consultant is suggesting pick the most. It's easiest to do. We will get a ranking from that, by the way, because there will be differentiation of opinion, but we can do that. It will just be a more difficult survey. We'll suggest that to the professional who's recommending this approach, and see how they go. The other thing that I would also point out is that we are not paying we're not paying the person who's creating the survey to actually analyze the survey. So this will be a staff obligation. Mr. Harris?
Well, I would agree with Mr. Dayton. And so I think one, we're getting questions at this period of time. We're still having public comment coming forward, and then additional deliberation. I would just broadly turn off my phone real quick. Just echo Mr. Dayton's response, which is we are working with a professional survey consultant, and so part of this too is taking forward the feedback. And unless there's some really difficult issue that we wouldn't be able to incorporate, I think we're looking to take forward the direction of council. So with that, let's maybe suggest keep moving forward, and this is kind of a cumulative process. Great. So going on to the next question. Q3, question 3 and A and B are kind of paired, and now you'll start seeing a series of paired questions. And this, I think, gets back to Mayor Pro Tem's statement earlier of wanting kind of a little bit more descriptive statements from respondents. And so you'll see that being incorporated in a series of these questions coming forward. So question 3A, which of the following statements comes closest to your own opinion about State Street? Bicycles do not belong on State Street between Gutierrez and Sola. Bicycles do belong on State Street between Gutierrez and Sola. No answer. And then the companion piece to this is 3B, is what's the main reason you feel that way? Short answer is thought of there. And I can
Any questions from my colleagues?
I'll just
Please
keep
continue.
going. Okay, keep going forward. Question 4A, here's a list of activities that people say they do on State Street. Which one do you expect to do most on a regular basis when you imagine visiting State Street in the future? Shopping, A is shopping, B, going to a restaurant and bar, C, attending cultural events, museums, theater, live music festivals, D, walking, strolling, E, spending time with friends and family, F, other, opportunity to comment, and then G, no answer. And then question 4B, again, now you're starting to see kind of consistency as we work our way through the survey. This is kind of the same question, just looking for the second most. And so again, that idea that this is ultimately creating a ranking out of these 6 options, and obviously the opportunity for people to add an additional description in both of these instances is the series of these 2 questions. And at this point, we're kind of starting to project, and these again are descriptive statements that people would be putting in written format. So question 5, in your opinion, so this is again qualifying. Now, please imagine State Street as it could be in 10 years. Question 5, in your opinion, what one word describes the character of the downtown State Street area, including the street space and adjacent buildings as you hope it will be in 10 years? Question 6, in 10 years, what specific change would you hope to see in the downtown State Street area? And then question 7, what do you hope doesn't change about the downtown State Street area? Pause there if there's any questions. And then continuing on, please finish the following statement with the option that comes closest to your own opinion. Question 8A. The most important reason to make the downtown State Street area the best it can be is because A, State Street is a key component of Santa Barbara's overall economic health. B, the condition of State Street makes a big impression in how visitors perceive Santa Barbara. C, local residents utilize and value the State Street experience. D, the vitality of State Street is critical for creating a positive downtown residential experience. E, no answer. And then again, you start seeing the consistency. So it kind of creates a ranking companion question. The second most important reason to make the downtown State Street area the best it can be is because, in the same listing on the previous. So instead of that last question being rank highest, lowest, here is just a series of follow-up where they're really ranking the top two, as you'll note from this. And I think the consultant was recommending this approach versus the ranking methodology. And then we go into a series of demographic questions. So we qualify and define, who is responding. Again, our focus is residents, but we're going to be using a variety of techniques, as you'll see at the end of the slide. I'll highlight again for overview. So here are a few demographic questions. QD1, where do you currently live? In the city of Santa Barbara. B, Santa Barbara County, not in the city of Santa Barbara. C, California, not in Santa Barbara County. D, other USA, not California. E, outside of USA, and F, no answer. People are uncomfortable.
Mr. Harris, may I jump in with a question on that quickly? We got a comment via email from someone who had looked at this survey who mentioned that it may be interesting for us to try to break this down into neighborhood. So which neighborhood in the city of Santa Barbara you live in. And I'm wondering if you can respond to that idea, whether you think that's a good idea, whether that's feasible, what the value of doing so might be, and just to get your feedback on that suggestion in particular.
Yeah, no, I think it's an interesting question. I think it will be a little bit of a technical question as to the ability to add, either I guess another item of in the city of Santa Barbara, and then people fill in. I guess it'd be interesting. Data is always, I think to your earlier point, data is always interesting. Ultimately, how people define their neighborhood. It could be Milpa Street, or it could be State Street. So, how descriptive they are, is a kind of open-ended question. And so we could get data, but I'm not sure if it will be descriptive, in the context people are just making reference to a street they live on, and maybe that street spans the whole city. And so unless they put a specific address, so I guess that's just a little bit of the question of, putting out there, unless we kind of created a whole other category if you live in the city, and then create a drop-down category, and then how are we defining the city? Council districts, how many people are familiar with the council districts? How many collective neighborhoods are there? There's quite a lot of defined smaller neighborhoods. So interesting, it's just somewhat problematic. And at the end of the day, if they are in Santa Barbara, I think that's the most important in my opinion. And so if they're not in the city and they were filling this out, I think that's interesting to note, and kind of how they correlate to, back to your earlier question, if they are not in a city resident, but they're a county resident, I think really important. If maybe they're not even a Santa Barbara County resident, but a Californian, how they respond to I think those are the more kind of driving context of how non-residents view and respond to this, probably more so than whether you're, live on the east side or west side, on the Riviera waterfront. So my 2 cents.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
So moving forward, we also got some good comments from Mr. Clausen in that regard as well. So we'll be incorporating that. So we say sex, I think it's more appropriate to say gender. In age, we have the broad categories there. And then just again, the ending that people have. I'll now transition into the iPad survey. So these be kind of intercept surveys on State Street.
Mr. Harris, may I interrupt you quickly? Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon, did you have a question at this point?
I do, because the intercept survey is something different. So this is particularly for people who are not coming to State Street. I'm really interested, we talked about this, I think, a previous meeting, about why and what would bring them. And so I'm specifically thinking of our residents who, there's a large groups of people who just don't come to State Street. And I think if the intercept survey won't capture them and boards and commissions won't necessarily capture them, just the question of, could we have a question like, if you're not coming to State Street, what would you like to see, or what would bring you there? Or I guess more the question at this point is, how are we intending to reach a broad audience?
Madam Chair and Mayor Pro Tem, excellent feedback. So one, in response, when I finish walking the subcommittee through these questions, I do have a recap slide that I'll highlight our outreach efforts. And we've been getting feedback along the way, so there might be some additional thoughts along that. So to that, answer the latter part of your questions, and then to your former, I'm more than happy to incorporate a question. It would be right before the demographics, but to the line of questioning that you're asking, which is, if you're, we'll work with the professional surveyor so we get it, more technically accurate than what I'm just describing here on the cuff. But, if you do not frequent or come to State Street often, why would those, and give a list of reasons, I think, to your point, just so we get some context. I think that would be really helpful if people are filling this out and they're not, or maybe it's worded a little differently, maybe not as explicit, but what would be more motivating to come to State Street in the future? Some variation, but I agree. I like that line of thinking, which is, it would be an interesting question too, if they don't come to State Street frequently, but have answered this questionnaire, what are they imagining versus, if they respond to that question. So that question may actually be a two-part question. Do you frequent State Street, or you don't frequent State Street? And if you don't, then why? So we'll work with a professional surveyor. That's a great suggestion, in my opinion. So thank you for that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Agreed.
So I'm going to continue on here in the complete the survey presentation on. So here again is the qualifier that would be presented to those. We're using the ambassadors, and they're principally on State Street, but they work their way up and down the street. So we need your help, Santa Barbara city leaders, in the process of planning the future of State Street and adjacent streets, especially the blocks between Gutierrez and Sola Streets, to shape how the area serves the community. Today, we're asking people who use this area to please help by answering a very short 3-question survey. There are no right or wrong answers. We just want your honest, top of the mind response to each question. And please try to keep your responses short, because I need to type them into this iPad. So that is the qualifier that goes into these series of questions. So here we go. Question 1A, imagine State Street in 5 years in the future. So we're bringing back the timeline a little shorter, so it's not so difficult for folks on the street, on the spur, to be thinking of this. In as a few words as possible, what do you hope to see or do more of? So, and then the follow-up to that response, whichever they give, is why do you hope that? So we get some aspirational understanding. 2A, again, imagine State Street in 5 years in the future. What do you hope to see or do less of? And then the follow-up to that, why do you hope that? And then 3A, and once more, imagine State Street 5 years in the future. What do you hope stays, I'll fix that, the same, and why do you hope that? And I'll pause there for any questions on this slide and series of questions. And now moving forward to the second part of this, so at this point, I was just going to make a commentary. We would also have the demographic questions that we had on the prior, just so we know who's responding on the State Street survey. I just didn't replicate them here, but we'll have these three kind of open-ended questions, the follow-up, and then the demographic questions. And then, as I referenced earlier, survey outreach. So this is kind of the broad level. Obviously, we'll be adding greater level of detail and finesse here, but we're going to have the survey information available in the December water bill, commentary that came along of having paper surveys available. So we'll need to think of where we have those to be able to be distributed and collect. Obviously, a Spanish version. Obviously, this will be an online presence. Library newsletters, press release, community groups helping spread the word, social media, the ambassadors obviously facilitating the in-person survey approach. And then there was a suggestion in our last meeting to get this out in other, because not all rental residents in rental properties typically do not get a water bill per se. And so the idea of maybe getting a gas bill or electric bill insert, we've reached out to those utility companies. They're not in favor of facilitating in this regard. But I think the stand-in to that is we have a number of property management companies in town, so we would get them a notice that they could put up in the laundry rooms, or maybe even ask them to include in any kind of communications they have with the tenant. So a way to kind of augment to our renters in the community if they aren't necessarily being identified through these communication methods. And so with that, we are at the time of public comment. I will drop my camera.
Let me ask questions from my colleagues first. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the ambassador survey, the intercept survey, I guess this is a question, but also a comment about maybe it'd be good to have questions about what brought you here today. And then it's such an opportunity to find out how people travel to State Street. Like, what brought you here today? And how did you get here? And how long are you planning on staying today? I think just short answers on that. So like, who's currently coming to State Street and what it is they're there for as we look to the future. Okay.
Great.
We can do that.
Okay. Well, now it is time for public comment on these two survey forms. Ms. Perea, do we have anyone who would like to speak to us on this item?
We do. We have multiple hands raised. So we're going to go ahead and start with Hillary Blackerby. Hillary, you're welcome to go ahead and start speaking.
Hi there, council members and staff. My name's Hillary Blackerby, just here as a city resident, and I'm really excited that the community is going to be surveyed. I think one thing that's true, this one comes as a shock coming from me, but I think it's a bit about mobility and how people get to State Street, but also get around is important. It's something that has shifted more dramatically in the past 8 months than it has over the past 120 years. There's always been some way to get up and down State Street, or at least around downtown in a pretty efficient manner. Not on foot or on bike or in car. And so I think it's interesting. It would be interesting to look at that. Also, the methodology with the question about bikes. It's something that I saw in the survey design of the AIA survey that I thought was a little lacking. Is, should bikes be there? But if you've been in State Street lately, you're like, should they mix with pegs? Should they be, I think having a little bit more of explanation of if there's a safe place for each mode, is it appropriate? I think it is really important. Otherwise, you have totally different context for people saying like, well, no, I don't want to, be in the same exact place as a bike. If you're a cyclist, no, I don't want to be dodging and bobbing and weaving around pedestrians. So I think it's important to have more context on that question specifically, but I think it's also important to ask people how they ideally would get around the downtown. And that goes for future residents, current residents, visitors, anyone who would take it. That's a really important question to ask. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Blackerby. Next commenter, Ms. Perea.
Next commenter is Betsy Kramer. Betsy Kramer, you're welcome to go ahead and start speaking. You're going to need to unmute yourself. Betsy Kramer, you're going to need to unmute your microphone. Madam Chair, why don't we go on to the next person? The next person is Anthony Grumbine, and we can come back to Betsy Kramer. Anthony Grumbine, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so this is, I think the survey is very interesting, and I think it brings up a number of very good issues that need to be discussed and figured out, and I think it does a good job of kind of in general of getting a pulse, and I think the discussions that you've had in terms of ways of tweaking the survey and refining it are all good. I think that it will give a little bit better of a picture. But I do, in sort of the bigger picture, stepping back a little more, I think it is important to treat it as a survey to get sort of ideas and thoughts and issues that people have with, and the bicycles is a good example, where people that you'll get feedback about what people feel is safe or not safe, or things flying by, and a lot of the stuff that we've heard on HLC and complaints and things that they love and then things that people complain about. So that I think it's important so that it can be considered and thought of as a whole. But I think also one of the main things is as a sort of holistic approach, I think really to State Street as State Street is, and this was discussed in the AIA charrette and HLC as well. State Street is the spine of Santa Barbara, and I think that sort of the body analogy is a good one because there are different parts of the city and they have different roles, but they all still have to work together, and you get the best design when you think holistically about it. And the State Street is the spine, and as a spine is super important. There's also the arms and the legs and the heads and the organs and sort of everything else that goes into a full body. And I think that it really needs to be considered as a whole along those lines, which this being a critical part of it, but it's just a part within a whole. So I think it's an important and a good beginning for the survey, but just to really see it as a way of understanding the issues a little bit, but not necessarily as a solution. So anyways, those are my initial thoughts on the survey so far.
Thank you, Mr. Grumbine. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Barry Remis. Barry Remis, please unmute your microphone. You're welcome to go ahead and speak.
Thanks again, committee members. It's Barry Remis again, representing the Coalition for Sustainable Transportation. Quickly, great to see this survey come to life. Really want to commend the staff and the consultant and you for your important feedback on this. Question number one, two actions that I didn't see listed on there, or not two, but one, and I'm wondering if there was thought given to including an option for housing on State Street and also maybe perhaps corporate employers. If people are considering what's most important or second most important in ways to improve State Street. On question number three, one I was wondering about, and I want to also echo the sentiment about potentially being able to reframe the question about bikes and maybe give people an option to be able to perhaps give choices about how can we best accommodate bikes and other wheeled vehicles or wheeled devices, because do we want to restrict the question only to bikes? There are also skateboards and one wheels and inline skates and other types of devices that people could and are riding on State Street that might need to be accommodated in that question. And third, really want to underscore, I would think, just the importance of really being able to reach all the renters in the city that really do reflect a big population of the people that are coming to State Street and that will continue to want to come down to State Street in their opinions. So any way that we can get this survey out to, obviously the biggest population, and we know that with 60% renters in the city growing, that's going to be very important. So thanks again.
Thank you, Mr. Remis. Next speaker,
Okay,
please.
Our next speaker is Richard Clausen. Richard Clausen, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Chair Harmon. you have my correspondence, and I'm not going to belabor that, except I do want to reemphasize one thing that was somewhat dismissed, and that is about the demographics, asking about the area that the respondents live in currently in Santa Barbara. And I can remember, I believe it was Councilman Gutierrez in prior discussions having some concern about whether his own constituents were being reached by survey instruments. And I think that's a legitimate question of all council members. Are the people that I represent, are they being reached by these surveys? Are their voices being heard? I think the survey has the opportunity to take this immediate situation and get an even more global response to the big question of what would it take to get you to come to State Street? And my last points have to do with questions 1, 4, and 8, all of which, first of all, ask you what's your first choice or your most important choice, and then follow up with, well, what's your second choice? And I think it's already a complicated and somewhat long questionnaire that you expect a lot of people to answer. And I believe that you get the same data back if you just ask people what's their first choice, or if you ask them to name 2 choices, because when you aggregate those all together, you get a ranking. You find out what was the most popular response or the most 2 popular responses. And so you know what the general public is thinking with respect to its most popular reason for going downtown. That's the one that got the most votes, and you know the second as well, and you get a better ranking. So I think you can consolidate those questions, make it simpler, and get the same result that you can deal with at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clausen. Ms. Perea, is there another speaker?
Yes, let's go ahead and try Betsy Kramer. She's the last speaker, so let's see if we can't get her microphone to work. Betsy Kramer, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute your microphone. There should be a little microphone emblem or symbol on your computer, and if you go ahead and click on that, you should be able to speak. It doesn't appear she's having any success with that. Hold on one sec. It does look like we have another hand raised, however. So why don't we take her? It looks like Betsy Kramer might be having some difficulty. I'm going to try and help her offline. In the meantime, Leslie Wiscombe has raised her hand. So Leslie Wiscombe, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, council members. Thanks for the excellent work that you're doing. I think the survey is a good beginning, but I'd like to see more visioning opportunities. It seems narrowly focused. It's very difficult to select the most important thing when some of the selections carry equal import in my mind. I'd have a hard time choosing. So I think if we could widen it out to some visioning. I know at the Planning Commission, Commissioner Lodge talked about living rooms downtown. Commissioner Escobedo talked about districts. Let's have a theater district, a play area district, et cetera, et cetera. These are all visioning ideas, which I think will help us in addition to the questions that you're asking at the beginning of the survey about what's the most important. But I agree with Mr. Clausen. I think it should be, you should be able to select a couple items, because I think then that will come to the top. And with respect to Councilmember Harmon's question about what neighborhood do you live in, I think it would be very easy to put down East Side, West Side, downtown, Mesa, et cetera, and you would just select one, and then that would eliminate that and give you some valuable information there. And that's really all I had to say, but thank you all for your excellent work.
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. Ms. Perea, is Ms. Kramer able to join us?
It appears that it is actually Natasha Todorovic, and she's listed for some reason under the name Betsy Kramer, but she is attempting to speak. And Natasha, if you hear me, go ahead and unmute yourself. I believe you're unmuted. You can go ahead and speak. Natasha Todorovic, you can go ahead and speak. Your microphone is live.
Okay, well, it seems we don't have Ms. Todorovic or Ms. Kramer. Let's give it 30 more seconds and see if anyone jumps in. I want to make sure everyone has the opportunity to speak.
She's sending me a note saying that she is trying to speak, but we aren't hearing her. So at this point, I'm not sure. I do show that you have a live microphone, but we aren't hearing you. If you'd like to go ahead and email your comments to me, I will make sure that the panel gets those. If you're able to use your microphone, you can go ahead and start speaking. I see that it does appear live, but if you're having difficulty, you can go ahead and just email your comments, I think. Or if you have a question, you're welcome to send that to me. Madam Chair, it appears she's having some difficulty, so there are no more hands raised.
Thank you, Ms. Correa. And with apologies to Ms. Todorovic on the technical trouble, please do send us an email with your comments, and hopefully we will be able to get that resolved. So with that, we will close public comment, and I open it up to my colleagues to discuss the survey and make deliberations. Mayor Pro Tem Snedden, if you'd like to begin with your.
Thank you. I think just overarching, I'm really happy to see the survey questions. Just for some discussion points, one of the purposes of this survey, from how I understand it, is to help us come to a vision statement and something to bring to council. So I think even though it's professionally developed, even though this is how surveys may be done in other places, I'm really not sure that I have the questions here to answer the vision for State Street kind of question. Just to that same thing that we already sort of talked about open-ended, some more of that open-ended question on there. And particularly the something about how the most important, I would like to see a question, and I know this is a lot more work and it will take some discussion whether it's worthwhile or not, but for me to have input that I would want for a vision statement, I want to know, how do people see these integrated? How do people see housing and transportation and wheeled mobility? How do people see that coming together, as opposed to what's the most important and then even ranked, what's the second, third? Sure, we'll get something that ranks that, but then how do we bring that into a vision statement, which is the end product of this, in what is the cohesive view of bringing it all together? And I think that's where I feel that, you know, all of those things are important. And if it comes back that one of those is the most important for 90% of people who answer their survey, who live in one particular neighborhood, I'm not sure that's going to help me with the cohesive view of what we need State Street to be and what we vision, the big, big vision. And we don't do this very often or ever, where we're asking the community, like, dream big. What do you see? What do you want to experience when you're here? I don't feel that there's an opening here that, you know, I want to hear from people, things that I don't know already, things that I'm not seeing already, and all ages. And so you have the ages of the respondents, but I want to know, are you there? You know, have you come here 3 times this week, sometimes with your mother-in-law for lunch, and one time with your kids strolling, and one time, you know, with a friend from out of town that you wanted to show the town? I mean, those deeper kind of, like, what does State Street mean to you and how are you experiencing it? I just don't get that from the survey. It's very technically fine, but another example would be like the bicycle question, as opposed to, do bikes belong on State Street or do bikes not belong on State Street? I mean, wow, if you really want to limit what our visionary options are, that's how you ask the question. You know, thumbs up, thumbs down. I mean, a really interesting question that would help us, I think, inform a vision would be, how do you see bicycles and pedestrians and strollers and wheelchairs integrated on State Street? How do you see that happening? Much more useful to me in the visioning process. So again, I guess, you know, I could go through each question and say how to just tweak it here or there, but it's more of an overarching, I mean, if we really are taking this seriously as a vision of State Street, or else don't call it that. Just call it State Street, bikes or not, cars or not. And then the survey seems suited for that. But if we're really thinking about, are we bringing housing downtown? Where is that? And how does that integrate in? How did you get to State Street? Where are you parking? Or is it really true that people aren't using cars anymore? Will you use e-bikes? You know, there are all kinds of things. Are you here for the day? Are you just dropping in? I don't know, bigger questions of our State Street experience aren't there. And we have the open-ended, but they're not, I don't know, I think when you have this chance to like dream big, we can whittle it down later, but like the invitation for the community to like, let's hear it, let's have it. And we're gonna see later the AIA charrette presentations, wildly different ideas that come from that. And then it's our job to kind of look at them and distill it to a vision. But if I don't feel that there's the huge question posed, then I just feel like, well, okay, I can vision from my multiple choices of visions, but it doesn't feel the same to me. So I guess that would be my overarching discussion on that. And then that carries through to each of the questions, sort of the tone of it and the feel of it is a very like checkbox, turn it in, and then from that we'll pick from our menu item vision statement, and I'd like it to be broader than that.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, my girlfriend, she worked doing surveys for years, so I know the benefits and also the problems with surveys. The best way I can describe it to people is kind of like when you lick your finger and you hold it up to tell which direction the wind's blowing. Is it extremely scientifically accurate? No, but does it give you an idea? It does. So for the most part, I'm content with how the survey is being laid out and going to be implemented. But yeah, again, I don't necessarily feel like it'll give us a best representation, but it will give us an idea. So I'm content with it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gutierrez. Yeah, I think I'm where you are, Councilmember Gutierrez, in general, though I think Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon brings up some really important points about how we move ourselves from these sort of very concrete questions to a vision, which in and of itself is inherently not a concrete thing necessarily. It's more amorphous, it's ephemeral. So trying to balance the ephemeral nature of a vision statement with the real black and white concrete nature of a survey is a challenge. And I think Mayor Pro Tem really hit the nail on the head with, I think, what all three of us are sort of feeling a little bit. I would say, I think we have an opportunity to work with the surveyor to expand the survey a bit, maybe to provide more opportunity for open-ended questions, as Mayor Pro Tem suggested. I agree that it would be incredibly useful to include a question or something related to what would bring you to State Street. Do you go to State Street? If not, what would bring you there, to really try to get at something a little bit deeper. I also agree with the comments made by Ms. Blackerby and Mr. Remis related to mobility and how that is engaged with in this survey. If we could work to have a little bit more nuance on those questions, I think we would be very, very well served. If we could reframe it in some way, and as Councilmember Gutierrez pointed out, surveying is really an art form, and I don't pretend to have any expertise, so I truly can't give any suggestions. But if we could find a way to work on some nuance there, I think that would be helpful. I also would like to see, sorry, there's some noise going on my end. I would like to see whether some type of ranking, or if you could just have a conversation with the surveyor about that. And I appreciate that, you know, we're trying to be timely with this, and we're balancing a lot of different things. We don't, you know, there's a capacity for a survey that's so huge and so broad, it would take, you know, a year to complete. We're not going that direction. So I appreciate that we're trying to be pragmatic with this, but if you can just have the conversation rather with the surveyor about what the quality of data that we might get back if we move to more of a ranking approach. I think that would be just interesting to have. And I know that you all will be very sensitive to the concerns that we lay out here. I think it would be really interesting to have data on broad neighborhoods. I appreciate, Mr. Harris, your feedback that, you know, all of us, we tend to have different views of what our neighborhood is called, and that I understand, but it's something else to consider, potentially putting it to the surveyor, whether that would be something simple to do or useful to do, or if there's some sociological or scientific reason why it's a bad idea. I would be open to that, but it's definitely something that I'm interested in from a data perspective. So would like that conversation. Personally, I'd like that to be had as well. But I think, again, just to get back to where I started, you know, I think that if we could take the opportunity to provide more space for folks to dream within these questions, adding an open-ended option where they can write in potentially, you know, what it is that they would envision, and to really sort of think broadly and dream big. I think that would be a great thing. And it would add something. Of course, you know, we'll get 9,000 different responses, and that will be incumbent on us to really sift through those and read each and every one of them. But I'm very happy with this effort and really appreciate the time and energy. With that, Mr. Harris, would you like us to take a vote on this, or is this just informational and you can move forward with the feedback that we've provided?
No, I think this was exactly what we needed, which was a comprehensive review, both combination of questions, but also this really thoughtful feedback. So thank you to you and your colleagues, and then for as always, the very thoughtful public resident comments that we get in contributions, be it outside as the work group as well as here today in these meetings. So thank you to everyone for their very thoughtful input. I think we understand clearly the kind of the tension. I think that's been defined of kind of, you know, we have very high aspirations of the level of information that we're seeking, but then the operational constraints of just survey tools. So I think we'll take all of this feedback. We'll work with the survey consultant to refine this to achieve the ideals that we're seeking, recognizing that will probably never necessarily be kind of the exact ideal. And then just to the last kind of ending comments, to put this in perspective. So in addition to the surveys, we'll have kind of dual approaches. We're also going to, you know, start, you know, filtering through and combining, you know, over, gosh, I don't know what the number, over 100, you know, commission members that we've been hearing from. And, you know, a lot of the commentary that's been made today in relation to the restrictions of the survey tool, we've had those kind of more focus group conversations. Ideally, we could be having those focus group conversations with residents, but just with the restrictions of public health pandemic, that's more challenging. But we are getting that kind of more finessed feedback in relation to kind of the operational vision and the kind of that we're idealizing. So we're going to be pulling that information together, and then broadly we'll be establishing a vision statement, and that's kind of a guiding principle. But as the project then, you know, starts to answer those project questions, you know, we're ultimately going to, if there is an assumptions here, council support, a recommendation from this body, and then ultimately council support of a vision statement, and then an idea that we do want to redesign State Street, then we're going to go through a much more substantive evaluation process of design conditions and taking all of this, the vision, the guiding principle, as it were. But then, as we've done on so many projects that the city's so well experienced in really engaging, and we'll be having community groups and focus groups and various design charrettes and exercises when we go through the actual aspect of designing. So just to kind of put, everyone at ease, is this isn't the document, isn't the vehicle that's going to ultimately extrapolate a final design. This will just be one of those initial steps of a thousand path journey, as it were. So just to kind of put everyone in context and at ease that, this will be kind of a formational piece, but not the end by any means.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. That's an important reminder of the many steps that we have to go. So with that, I will close this item and move on to the next and final item on our agenda today, which is, I believe, a presentation from the AIA on the State Street charrette.
Yes, and with that, I'm going to drop off the screen. I'm going to switch screens because I do have their presentation up and available. And then I believe Nina's going to come on and introduce our American Institutes of Architect representatives today.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. I'm Nina Johnson, Senior Assistant to the City Administrator. The planning process starts with imagination, and the pandemic accelerated many changes that were already underway for some time. Our local AIA chapter rose to the occasion and expanded their design charrette process that was being planned to include the promenade and to open it to the community to participate. Altogether, the design charrette involved upwards of 160 architects, landscape architects, engineers, planners, interior designers, and other specialists, all of whom volunteered their time and their talent to keep our community dialogue moving forward, and they continue to do so. I think it's really important for us to keep in mind that they are design professionals, but first and foremost, they're our local residents. They know our streets, they know our paseos, they know our historic buildings, they see opportunities all around us. So they really bring a valuable perspective to our conversation, and they're in a unique position to share with the community. So we're joined today by several charrette participants and organizers. I'm going to turn it over to one of the co-chairs, Cassandra Ensberg, a local architect.
Good afternoon, or I guess it's still, oh, it is afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. We're just delighted to be here. Thank you to the committee, the subcommittee on State Street. Thank you for having us here today. As Ms. Johnson said, I am Cassandra Ensberg, architect and co-chair of the AIASB Advocacy and the Charrette 2020, along with my colleagues Ellen Bilston and Detty Pikert. All of us are here today. Also present are other participants of the charrette, Dennis Thompson, Robert Adams, Roxana Bonderson, John Margolis, Paul Rupp, and hopefully Fred Sweeney. He was having trouble getting on. He's going to try to join if he could. We're hoping to have time. We wanted to give an update of the charrette, share a little bit of the survey information that we created in advance of doing our work, and to share selected images relevant to the promenade work that you are focusing on. And we were hoping to have a little time at the end to hear from you and have a little bit of a conversation and dialogue about any questions you might have. And that's why we have our other colleagues here today, because they're the people who were the designers of the corridor portion of the charrette. I just wanted to say a moment to really appreciate the involvement from the city, so critical, and particularly our city planners and also Nina Johnson, who were just instrumental in helping us get this to this point. And we appreciate you as our leaders. We noticed that many of you did attend some of the Charrette Zoom meetings over the past months, and we really appreciated that. And we now can get into the weeds and start finding the best options for Santa Barbara moving forward. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Ellen Bilston, who's going to give an update of the where we are with the charrette. And she will be followed by Dennis Thompson, who can share some information about the highlights of the survey. And then it will go to Debbie Pikert, who will share a PowerPoint that we put together where we edited out the particular parts of the charrette that we thought would be most helpful to you. And then if there is any time, we'd love to be able to have questions. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ellen, and thank you all again for allowing us to come here today.
Thank you, Cass. You can all hear me well?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So just to provide a quick overview and update of current efforts associated with this community vision charrette. We started out with a pre-designed survey that was created, broadcast, and then input was gathered from the public. That period went from July through mid-August, and nearly 5,000 responses were collected from the public. Design work then began and was donated by over 160 participants, architects, and associated engineers and designers were arranged into 16 teams, and their work went from mid-August through early October. We're currently collecting, or we've collected all of the work from these 16 teams, and we're assembling a book that will show all of the charrette work that was produced. And that's getting organized and will be printed for city council members. It will also be available online to anyone who's interested. So we really want broad distribution of that book that we're assembling. So, and then from now until January 4th, we have an exhibit of the work on display in the storefronts at the corner of Cannon Perdido, 872 and 901 State Street buildings. This exhibit was curated using all the work collected from the charrette and illustrating the solutions by topic. So now underway is part of what we're in the midst of with the subcommittee and with other groups. It's the community education and input effort. The exhibit was designed to engage, educate, and get feedback from the community. And these will be, the input can be given to aiasb.org or plansb.org. So 2 websites where we're welcoming thoughts and input to be given. These will be listed in the exhibit at the promenade. Our upcoming steps include a request for special meeting with City Council for a full discussion of this enormous community donated effort focused on housing, open spaces, and the promenade. We're hoping this subcommittee can help and support the scheduling of a special meeting with City Council in early January 2021. The next slide shows the many sponsors who supported the effort. And now I'll hand it off to Dennis Thompson, who will share an overview of the survey.
Great, Nina, if you could go to that next slide. Council members, just like you, we decided to, before we began our design process, to conduct a survey. And a few of us designed a 16-question survey, and we distributed throughout the community in both English and Spanish media, the print media and radio, as well as our own contacts and social media lists. And on the next slide, you'll see a little bit about who responded very evenly among these various age groups. And as I said, there were 16 questions in the survey only 4 of them were addressed for the promenade itself. So let's look at the first of those. The survey was conducted mainly in August, and so as of August, as we just heard, almost 5,000 people answered. I think we got one more slide before that, Nina, that it just has to do. Okay, let's go back to that one. The support for the idea of closing the street had been closed for a few weeks. People had already experienced it. The support was overwhelming. It was, you know, these top 3 bar graphs here, a total 93% of the participants wanted it to remain closed permanently, either in a greater extent or a lesser extent. So that was the big answer. Unlike the survey you've been talking about, or maybe what your survey will become, we did leave at each question an open-ended request for response. And to this question, we got 618 responses. And to the very first question of, have you been on the newly closed State Street? We got 621 responses. You wouldn't have expected any responses to that, but people wanted to write sentences and paragraphs about how much they loved it, how it could be better, what they had seen in other cities, great ideas that we would perhaps never have thought of. Next slide. We did ask, back one. We did ask right away how people were feeling about the mix of pedestrians and cyclists, and there was a majority at the time in August who felt that cyclists belong on the promenade. There was also a significant minority of 35% who thought bikes didn't belong there with pedestrians. This one had 1,040 written responses. Blows your mind how many people had comments to say about this. Very thoughtful, very detailed comments. And next. We asked again, we didn't allow any require any limitation on this. What activities would you like to see on State Street? Of course, dining was a big one. Food trucks were very popular. Music, art, places to sit. But you can see the numbers on these. And we're happy to share the entire survey with you with the thousands of written comments as well. So I hope that would be helpful. And I think Detty now will talk more about the process itself.
Thank you, Dennis, and council members. Yeah, I want to just do a quick shout out here to Cass and Nina for the tremendous amount of work that they put into making this exhibition on State Street happen. With all of these posters. And you can see in this photo is just an example of a couple of the storefronts that are displaying these posters. And you see people actively engaged in looking at these. I know I've been down there myself and overheard some really interesting conversations, et cetera, of people examining this work. Now, we know, of course, that your focus in this committee is on the promenade primarily. But I want to mention that, you know, living, working, and playing in the city requires housing. And ultimately, the success of the promenade is dependent on people. And so the housing, having housing downtown in the downtown area, of course, is a key component of it. And that was a specific focus of the charrette. But we know that in the limited time that we have available this morning, I just want to kind of touch on some of the focus that we had on the State Street Promenade. You know, we had 16 teams working on this, and 12 of them focused on housing and other issues, but each one of those teams also focused on their little portion of State Street. But we had 4 teams that were primarily focused on the entire corridor. That was their focus. And here you can see each of them, how they articulated their vision for the permanent opening of State Street as a promenade. And I think it's just tremendously exciting. I'm just going to share a few slides, further slides with you
that we kind of selected from this huge body of work, which I think Ellen mentioned we were planning to print into a book, and we're going to present each of the city council members and planning commissioners with a copy of that book, which has the entire body of work, which will number in the 250 odd pages. But if we go to the next slide, this one dealt with circulation, for example, and how the adjoining streets kind of interact and interrelate to the State Street Promenade section of it. To go to the next one, this slide shows some of the how the outdoor spaces can be used in different ways as for performances, etc., and art. And also, we're looking at how stormwater management can be handled in the street in a sort of a common, with a common kind of infrastructure, etc. Go to the next slide. Again, you know, I think these slides are a little bit mixed up from what I had in my order here in front of me, but this really is the slide that deals with circulation. Again, the cross streets and the one-way traffic going up and down on either side of State Street, Anacapa and Chapala Street. Go to the next slide. Okay, this is what I was looking for earlier. This is our, this is kind of a picture of some of the ideas that were generated with respect to creating outdoor performance spaces. You know, this is, again, as the survey showed, something that people are very interested in, having concerts and other types of artistic performances being, you know, prominent and available up and down, you know, the State Street Promenade, etc. Okay, next slide. This slide looks at public art, which is another really important feature of the kind of space that is really being envisioned for downtown. That there's a strong inclusion of public art, and that there are partnerships with arts organizations that could be developed and evolve so that there can be a real richness of public art and creative expression incorporated into the State Street corridor. Next slide. And this is what I mentioned, one that I mentioned earlier. There was an exhibit that showed a little bit of that, but this is more specific and detailed. As you know, any kind of new development has to deal with the stormwater impacts, et cetera, and routing that stormwater and cleaning it so that when it flows down to the ocean, it's not going to have a negative environmental impact. So we looked at various ways that that can be handled, and particularly with infiltration and deep filtration by organizing planting corridors in State Street that will ultimately be able to handle the stormwater, clean it, and filter it, et cetera. And that could be a kind of a long-term public infrastructure project that as new development comes along, they can contribute to it and participate in it. Next slide. And so this is an interesting one, especially related to the discussion about districts. That we have a fairly long corridor, and different parts of the corridor have different characteristics. And so I think there's a lot of creative ideas about how you can distinguish those districts with gateways, et cetera, as illustrated here, to sort of identify those districts and build on the character that may already exist there. Next slide. And then really ultimately what it's going to take to make all this happen over the long term is private-public partnerships, not only to create housing downtown on some city-owned land, but in particular to raise the funding that's going to be needed to build the infrastructure that will ultimately support this development of the State Street promenade in a kind of permanent basis. So hopefully we can see that framework being created. There've been some great suggestions, one of them being to create a foundation that would support raising money and funding for the work that has yet to be done. And this has been done in other communities, and I think it's something that could be very applicable here as well. Next slide. I think that may have been the last slide. So at this point, we'd love to have you engage with us with your questions, comments, etc. We have the other, the leaders of the 4 teams and participants of the four teams that worked on the State Street corridor: Robert Adams, John Margolis, Roxana Bonderson, Paul Rupp, and Fred Sweeney. Hopefully you made it on. And they're here to answer some of your questions, and if you have any related to the ideas and the vision that we've just kind of shared with you this morning.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming and presenting to us. I'll open it up to my colleagues at this point. Do either of my colleagues have any questions that they'd like to ask the team? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I suppose we could say this for discussion too, but I just have to say, before asking a question, it's so incredible to see the outcome of this particular charrette, and just, as I mentioned before, just how wildly different some of those visions are. And just exactly to that point, I mean, it wasn't a choice of, do you want this tree or that tree, but what do you see? And then the visions that came forward were really stunning, and beyond what we could have imagined, I think. My question here, and this stems from the last charrette that was put together, and we have those nice books and binders of those visions, and it was one of my hopes for this committee, and I wasn't sure how it would play out. But my question is, where do these charrettes then go? We have all of these visions, multiple different ways to view what could happen, and a very serious question I have is, how do we keep that from going and dying? How do we keep it moving as the city? What would our function be to keep that momentum alive?
Well, I'll take a shot at that, and maybe one of my colleagues would also like to add to it. You know, as I say, we're going to create this book, which is kind of in the works, and hopefully will be printed up in the next week or so. We have the exhibition, which I think was just a tremendously creative way of kind of keeping this, you know, in front of people. Ultimately, we are developing some specific recommendations for the community to consider. I mean, that's important. We have to have something, as you can say, to kind of grab onto and say, what can we do? What's the action item? So we want to help with that. We do have a lot of recommendations in effect that sort of come from the different teams. We're trying to consolidate them, simplify them, and provide the council with sort of some action items to consider. But ultimately, you know, it's really up to the community. It's up to the city to take these ideas and refine them and filter them down and start somewhere with action items that get things moving. And we know that ultimately it's going to evolve over a period of time as more and more people become engaged and interested in what's happening, and as we start to see real-time examples evolving on the street itself over time. But, you know, we'll do whatever we can from our side to help you keep it alive. And we're always willing to jump in and do a presentation. I know we've been asked by some local organizations, stakeholder organizations, to present to their boards of directors and their membership, et cetera. And we're perfectly willing to continue to do that. But ultimately, as I say, it's up to the community and you as the leaders of the community to kind of take this and look at these recommendations and see how you want to address them.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you being here today. And I'm looking forward to when this comes to council, and just an invitation to please hold us to task on this, that we need to, I think, continue the conversation on how to move elements of this forward. Thank you.
I just wanted to add briefly, Councilmember Snedden, appreciation for your question, because that ultimately is the whole purpose behind the charrette. It's a creative exercise with a lot of professional people involved, but ultimately the whole goal is that it have impact on how the city moves forward. So we really appreciate your interest and encouragement to keep it alive and give it, make it have life in the way we move forward.
Great, wonderful. Well, at this point, Commissioner Bonderson, do you have something to add before we go to public comment?
Good morning. I wanted to just add another way of potentially thinking a bit far ahead into the future to address Mayor Pro Tem Schnedden's question as well. Another thought that we can have, just keeping it on the back burner, is that when something does come up, such as an idea that might be really a big vision, and a question often comes up like, what is the realistic approach to this? Is this even doable? That if any of those kinds of questions do come up from anyone on council, to please address it with us, and we can look at avenues that already exist, whether they be the permitting process or encroachment issues or other things like that. This is a little bit far into the future, but if there is anything like that that does come up in your thoughts, don't hesitate. It could be something that we do some research on and put some thought on while we are being creative, and just to help give a lot of hope to ideas that could happen that we've never thought of before. So just wanted to place that idea out into your thoughts.
Thank you, Ms. Bonderson. Ms. Ensberg, would you like to have a final word here before we open it up to public comment? I think you're still on mute, Ms. Ensberg. Ms. Perea, can you unmute Ms. Ensberg?
Thank you. I wasn't able to do it. Thank you so much. I just wanted to add just very briefly that, again, we are looking and hoping to have a separate meeting, a special meeting with council. We feel that this information is so huge and there's so much that we really want to get into a discussion. I'm sorry that we didn't have more time to hear from our other colleagues who are the ones who actually did the design work on the promenade and can really help to share the many ideas that were generated. But yes, the whole idea is now that we are in a listening mode. We're wanting to hear for the next 2 months until January while this exhibit is up. We want to hear from people. We've created the avenue that they can go to do that, to give their input, and that we want to hear what everyone has to say about it. And then we want to be with council and really have a robust discussion about the many, many, many options. So I just wanted to say that's how we will keep it alive, and I appreciate very much Mayor Pro Tem Snedden's comments about this, as well as yours. And we're just really excited to keep this going and to continue to engage the community to find answers that we need. Thank you so much for allowing us to come today.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, now.
Yeah, and I just want to say one quick thing is, there are 160 professionals volunteering their time. The ideas are wonderful, very imaginative. I think by having the exhibit and by having the booklet that we're going to publish, those are going to be ongoing resources that people can dive into. But the ideas sometimes are very pragmatic. Other times they're greatly imaginative. and it was just a real impressive sort of work of imagination by all kinds of professionals, especially the architects. That's all.
Thank you. I agree. An incredible creative gift that you all have given us. So at this point, I would like to open it up for public comment to give members of the public who may be participating in this meeting with us an opportunity to comment on your good work. Ms. Perea, is there anyone with their hand raised to speak?
Yes, we have Natasha Todorovic ready to speak. And Natasha, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute your microphone.
All right, do we have sound?
Yes, we do.
That's a miracle. All right, so actually that was really an absolutely beautiful demo on parts of the architects. So cheers on that. A couple of things. I'm going to comment on both. First is the survey initiative. I applaud it. And then I also applaud your instincts on the question where we were evaluating who State Street is for and the appropriateness of that category of questions, which reveals an intended bias. And I think the charrette shows what this intended bias is. So the main problems were framed earlier by Jason Harris, where he called this a marketing survey. There is confusion in intention in the survey. And the confusion here lies between the questions, is this a marketing survey or is this a measurement tool? The underlying assumption between the former and the latter makes this a crucial question for you to answer. So in both the marketing and measurement survey, you're seeking to understand something. And I've been working with assessment and surveying both in marketing and measurement for over 20 years, and I've done both. So working with these questions, making an assumption around the results, you have to choose which one you're playing with, right? In a marketing survey, the end result is already determined. So redoing State Street in this case today is already determined. So the question lies in, how do you sell your particular product to an audience? The audience is decided, that's the citizens of this town, and the product is already known, the charrette. So you're saying we're having a listening thing, but the dissent has been disappeared. So I'm bringing into question that the dissent, the public discourse, the we're listening, the process has been flawed in a lot of ways. So in an analytical survey, you're looking to understand and discover underlying trends, how an audience is thinking, you're using scientifically validated statements, but the definition of the construct is clear and the statements are designed to measure a valid construct. We don't have that here, but the problem here is the expectation of the survey. You want to make decisions based on this data, and it needs to decide whether it is a scientific survey or whether it is a marketing survey.
Ms. Todorovic, your time is up. Some closing thoughts, please.
Yeah, problem number 2, staff is supposed to design the results. Number 3, how are deliveries going to be made? How is ambulance going to get in there? How's fire going to get in there? How are police going to get in there? And this is a group that is very well funded, pushing forward an agenda. I want to see the democratic process earnestly at play here. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Ms. Perea, any additional commenters on this item?
Yes, next we have Anthony Grumbine. Anthony, if you'd like to go ahead and speak.
Great. All right. Thank you. And thank you to the AIA group for this presentation. As a little note, we had 2 little review teams of HLC, BAR, and SFCB that we broke into 2 little groups and reviewed. Each reviewed half of the teams, so each reviewed 8 teams, and it was great to review. There's a number of very interesting and wonderful ideas and very good Santa Barbara, very Santa Barbara-ish ideas that'll work very well here. And I think that there's a lot of great stuff in what they've produced. So thank you to them for all the hard work to make it happen. Which also brings up sort of the tied to the State Street question, because they, depending on we reviewed those four groups that were looking at the sort of the promenade. And in that, you saw four different ways of handling, and some varied greatly and some varied minorly, but different ways of just handling circulation. And I think that raises sort of the bigger picture question that we've been discussing, and you all have been discussing as well. But I just wanted to highlight it in that part of it is not as simple as the survey. The survey can tell us a little part of the information and some interesting data, but the reality is a design solution has to be really big picture, holistic, tie into the whole city, work throughout the whole city, and it really needs to, it really needs to solve a lot of different issues and problems in good ways. So this is a great start, and for both AIA and the survey. But I think really going forward, there needs to be that especially because we're talking about tens of millions plus dollars here of infrastructure. We really need to have a big master plan that works it all out, and then get into specific plans and areas that we really need to fine tune and develop. And so, so I look forward to this being a part of that whole process.
Thank you, Mr. Grumbine. Ms. Perea, another speaker?
There are none. He was the final speaker.
Great, thank you, Ms. Perea. With that, we will close public comment, and I will open it up to my colleagues for comments or discussion. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I will echo comments I've made before, and then also with Mr. Grumbine's comments that I personally love to see these visions, and some of them look to me like where we could move forward, and some of them look not. But I have my sincere hope is that these don't just languish, and that was one of the reasons that I thought having a downtown focused subcommittee was so important, was to be able to sort of sift through these and bring forward to council priorities that would help with the bigger vision. To Mr. Grumbine's comments, I can't agree more that we need a master plan for downtown. We talk a lot about State Street being the spine, and sometimes I wonder, a spine is very tailored to what the broader animal is. And if we don't have that view of what the broader animal is, I don't know that we know what kind of spine to make and to support. So I just, through all of this, my discomfort has been that we're going from micro and fixing these pieces in place, and then it's really going to end up directing the macro because of where we're putting these solidified pieces. And I'll just continue to have unease that with each individual piece, I still don't know the larger circulation pattern or the larger purpose through the broader community of State Street. So I'll just keep saying that my hope out of this subcommittee is that we will eventually make a recommendation that to really look at this holistically. I'm not sure what that outcome would be, but this in particular, this presentation today really highlights it because of so many beautiful options for what downtown could be through the AIA charrette visualized and in front of us, that then picking a path to make one of those really come to fruition won't happen piecemeal. So, but I really appreciate that thank you for bringing AIA today and having this presentation for us. And then, back to the survey questions, I really, again, it's the emphasizing the same, that this is the time to dream big. We can whittle it down later, but really appreciate today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to also thank AIA. One of the highlights I've come to realize recently for me is watching all your presentations and thinking about the future and how we can sculpt our community. And I look forward to being a part of that and working with all of you and the greater community and paving that road to our tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gutierrez. I will third my sincere thanks to AIA, to everyone involved in this process. You know, I think one of the things that was most surprising to me, of course, I've seen your work in the past, so knew what an incredibly gifted group of folks we have. But one of the most exciting things to me is how much your efforts have sparked my own creativity. You know, it's not something, you know, I don't normally think in those terms, and the discussions that you all were having have really framed my own focus. And I find myself walking up and down State Street and thinking about things in new ways. And so I want to say, just on a personal level, how much I appreciate that and how much you've expanded my own sense of what's possible. So very much grateful for that. I would love to see your team come to the full council, and I have advocated for that and will continue to do so. I think it was just such an incredible effort and deserves more time, certainly, than just today. And I know we will all continue to dig into the good work that you have done. I'll just close with that, and also with saying it was a great time, I think, for us to see the AIA presentation today, because we are getting so much information. This, in concert with the survey we're doing, in concert with the efforts that staff have made to go to the different commissions and get their feedback. And we're all working through this process together and trying to figure out what the right process is to getting to the end result that's going to serve our community best. And I'm confident that taking it step by step, like we are, and doing thing one first, and then we'll figure out the next phase, I think will allow us to really bring in the most people possible. So I'm really grateful for the work and for the effort, and excited to see what the results are of this survey and to continue the conversation with all of our community members. So Mr. Harris, I think you may have something to discuss regarding the upcoming meeting dates before we adjourn. You're muted, Mr. Harris.
Apologies. Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I just wanted to highlight our regular scheduled meeting dates that are coming up, quickly approaching end of calendar year, and just recognizing November 23rd is the Thanksgiving week. So I just qualify that may be canceled as we get closer to the holiday. We'll see where we're at in work effort and council members' availability. So just highlighting that for the member public. Overall, December 7th, we have a meeting scheduled, as well as the 21st. And then we have not established meeting schedule for 2021, which at this point, it's looking very likely we will be meeting in 2021. So I'll just be highlighting this. Mostly this is notice for the public so that they're able to be prepared and aware of our availability. So we'll be most likely establishing a meeting schedule on December 7th for 2021, or at least for the first half of the year thereof. So I just wanted to highlight that for the public, and again, join the subcommittee members in thanking AIA for their incredible hard work, their service to the community. This is just invaluable to have this level of creativity and professional design, and just placemaking, urban design, architecture. You know, this informs not only council from a policy standpoint, staff from a project kind of design implementation, but for all the property owners potentially considering what to do with their properties in the future, potential new investors wanting to come into the community. This is the beginning of us establishing the new perspective that Santa Barbara is open for business. We're willing to accept new opportunities, and we welcome that. Obviously, we have a high level of design expectations, a high level of expectations of engagement with our community, but overall, we're also a very creative community and looking forward to move our community forward. So this is just exciting times overall. Just feel very fortunate to help support these efforts. So with that, I'll end my remarks, and
great, wonderful. Well, a final thank you to the AIA team, those that were here and those that participated. Many thanks to staff for their hard work, and to my colleagues for some really substantive, important discussion, and the public commenters as well. This is, I think, really becoming a good, positive process. So with that, I would like to wish everyone a very good week, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.